The United States will soon have a new president, Donald Trump. The former US president made his way to the White House after a controversial campaign against Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. Trump's victory, driven by a platform of bold rhetoric and a promise to redefine America's global stance, has revived memories of his first term from 2017 to 2021, an era that strained transatlantic relations. In Europe, leaders are now trying to figure out what this means for security, the economy, and the relations with the United States. In this video, we will explore some possible consequences of a new Trump administration, including its impact on Europe's security, climate policy, and international cooperation. To get a better understanding on the topic, the European Newsroom spoke to the Dr. Ian Lesser, Distinguished Fellow and Advisor to the President at the Brussels office of the German Marshall Fund of the United States.
At one level, the result wasn't a surprise at all. I think what did surprise people on both sides of the Atlantic was the scale of President-elect Trump's victory. I think, of course, Europe had an experience once with the Trump administration, and for many, not all, European countries, it was rather uncomfortable.
Starting from the 20th of January next year, Donald Trump will return to the White House to begin his second non-consecutive term as President of the United States. Trump's victory on the 5th of November this year was more decisive than in 2016, as he not only won the popular vote, but also secured Republican control of both the House of Representatives and the Senate. European leaders rushed to congratulate the president-elect on the election night, but Trump's return could lead to a more challenging transatlantic relation, echoing the tensions of his first term. During his first term, the US and the European Union clashed over security, trade, and climate policy. Now, according to Dr. Lesser, with Trump's sharper agenda, including the threat of new tariffs and his proposed approach towards the Russian invasion of Ukraine, European leaders are facing renewed worries about the future of EU-US relations. At the EU level in particular, Donald Trump's unilateral approach and his emphasis on personal rather than diplomatic relations are causing concern.
I think if you look at how President-elect Trump looks at the world and foreign policy and economic policy, he tends to see the world not through institutions, or even sometimes through nation states, bilateral relationships, but above all through individual leaderships, personalities. That's not so unusual. It's not uncommon. I think a lot of his agenda really is focused on domestic public policy in the United States. A generally cautious attitude when it comes to foreign policy, but not isolationist. I think that's the wrong term to use. It's actually more likely to be unilateralist than isolationist.
During his first presidency, Trump threatened to withdraw the US from NATO if allies did not meet their defense spending commitments. He also suggested that Russian President Vladimir Putin should be able to do as he pleases with NATO members failing to meet the agreed 2% defense budget target. On Ukraine, Trump has refrained from committing to Ukraine victory over Russia, instead focusing on the need for a rapid peace settlement to end the war. This approach raises the prospect of reduced US support, potentially leaving European countries to shoulder the burden of supporting Ukraine on their own. Several European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, have recently reignited discussions on strengthening the European Union's defense capabilities.
This is not something that can be done overnight. To build a defense capability in Europe that would be capable of replacing the United States in terms of deterring Russia and meeting other risks would be the work of many years, an enormous investment, and maybe shifts in strategic culture that Europe isn't prepared to undertake. But all of that will be tested with the new Trump administration. I don't think that the scenarios, the more extreme scenarios about the United States withdrawing from NATO, for example, are very realistic. I think that's very unlikely. Could the United States make life difficult inside the alliance, as it has sometimes in the past? Certainly it could. And we're not the only ones, but in that sense, it could be quite an adventurous time in NATO. But I don't see the United States withdrawing from the alliance. It's simply not in our interest to do it.
Another potential point of conflict between the EU and the second Trump presidency would be his stance on climate change.
It's likely to be an area of very considerable difference between the United States and Europe. I would fully expect that President-elect Trump, when he comes into office, will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords once again. That will be very much opposed in Europe, obviously, and it has enormous meaning for global climate policy.
In conclusion, a second term for Donald Trump poses significant challenges for the EU in areas such as bilateral relations, trade, support for Ukraine, and climate change. In response, the EU will face crucial decisions.
In terms of whether Europe comes together as a result of this or not, is a really, first of all, it's an old question. It's not a new one, but it's given a special kind of impetus by this election in the United States, the result. And it seems to be an open question whether Europe sees this as an opportunity, a necessity, in fact, to increase its integration, especially on things like defense and economic innovation, or whether countries decide to sort of go it alone, in a sense, strike their own deals, or adopt more national policies dealing with Washington. On trade, it would be extremely difficult, but on some things, it could be possible. Those are two starkly different futures for Europe. We'll have to see.
Follow the European Newsroom for more.